and has meaning. Each moment is meant to be experienced and cherished. Welcome to Anxiety Simplified Podcast. I'm Joanne Williams, and I'm going to share ways to refocus this anxiety energy to a more productive and effective way to go through life. You already have all the tools. I'll just remind you how to use them. We'll be tuning into your own power to choose and find more joy and peace. Let's get started remembering this wisdom.
Well, hello, everyone. Joanne Williams here with Anxiety Simplified. And today I have a tenacious guest, Meredith Alexander, and I can't wait to introduce her. And I'm going to do it in just a moment. But she has a story about overcoming obstacles with her 27-year-old daughter, Skylar, who couldn't be here today. I'm kind of sad. Yet you're really going to want to hear their story and how they literally moved boulders out of their way on their amazing journey. So first, I want to just share a little summary of our show today, because you're going to hear some quotes about overcoming obstacles and how Meredith and her daughter really dealt with some fear or anxiety through their ordeal and really came out the other side. Also, how Meredith and her daughter's story still impacts thousands and been featured in media stories around the world. She has her own G.R.I.T or Grit Mindset Academy that has helped professionals and entrepreneurs move beyond their limits. But some of the things you're going to hear about today, really how to pivot from feeling overwhelmed in that mindset where you are able to get to and stay positively focused, even during extreme events in your life, and really how to get to your end game. And that's Meredith's term you'll hear more about, but your end game in life, that where you're going to love just to get up every day, even when those boulders cross your path, because we all know they do. And to begin to harness the secrets of the inner and outer game that can help you achieve amazing things, even those that previously might have even seemed impossible. And we're going to share some quotes to help you maybe get through some hard times. And I'm going to start off with one from Walt Disney, because he had to overcome a lot also. And we're both from Florida, so I thought that might be appropriate. So, and this is Walt saying, I always like to look on the optimistic side of life. But I'm realistic enough to know that life is a complex matter. And I think that's kind of what we're going to look at today. You know, you can still look at things positively even when they're complex. So I want to introduce Meredith Alexander, our guest today, who is a best-selling author, peak performance coach, inspirational speaker, and like I said, the grit mindset expert. Meredith has a book, The Sky is the Limit, that hit the #1 new release in motivational category on Amazon the night that it was launched. And it has been called a mandatory read if you dare to be the best version of yourself. So, Meredith, so nice to have you here and welcome. And we really want to hear your and Skylar's story and more about the great lessons that you've really learned as you've gone through this, and so that our listeners can really have some takeaways today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Joanne, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited to be with all of you listening. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Good. So just tell us your stories, or what do you think is some of the most important things? Or tell us your story, I guess, first, so people know more about you and Skylar.
Sure. Where I like to begin is really the reminder that for all purposes, Skylar, our story is quote unquote a story of ordinary people, where one day extraordinary things began to happen. And so imagine imagine being in the middle of your workday. It's a Friday afternoon and you're scurrying around, you're chasing, whatever it is we tend to be chasing in our lives, right? And there tend to be at least 400 or 500 that we're chasing at the same time, it feels like anyway. And so there I was really concluding this Friday. It was about 3:15 in the afternoon when the phone rang. And it was one of those moments where I just had this sense that I needed to pick it up. And I looked at the phone and it was an international number, and I was stunned. And so as I clicked to answer it, I knew just from hearing the inhale on the other side of the line that my life was about to change dramatically. And this tiny little voice, who ended up being one of Skylar's friends, said, I don't know how to tell you this, but Skylar's been in a terrible accident. No. The two girls had been part of a group of tourists in Colombia, South America. Sky had been down in Peru on a Yale fellowship, building schools and working with the indigenous population. And she and her friend Dana had decided to take this trip to Colombia, South America, and do all kinds of adventures. And this next to last day in Colombia, they had signed up for a whitewater rafting expedition. And so the story is that they had been through the treacherous part when this group pulled into this beautiful grotto that had a little ledge for jumping and diving in addition to swimming. Well, of course, Sky was such a daredevil that she could not resist going up and then jumping and going up and then jumping. And then one of these trips up the side of the cliff, somehow someone ahead of her, when they stepped on one of the boulders, the boulder broke loose and the boulder came crashing down, a direct hit right on Skylar's skull, right between her eyes, knocked her off the side of the cliff and into the boulders below. So when I got this call, Skylar was in an ICU that they had managed to find in Colombia, because they do not, most of the hospitals do not have ICU capabilities. So Sky was being feverishly worked on for collapsed lungs, fractured spine, fractured scapulas. Needless to say, her skull had been split open, her right thigh had been pulverized, and her left ankle was totally demolished. And so I was gently urged to get on a plane as quickly as possible, and they were going to try to do their best to keep her alive so I could say my final goodbyes.
Oh boy. Oh, a mother's worst nightmare is all I can feel.
Yeah. And I think, Joanne, you would know probably better than most that the mind at that point begins racing, and it's almost like a tug of war between surreal, this is not happening, this cannot be happening, and oh my gosh, why us, a perfect storm of just about every negative emotion.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm afraid my mind's goes, because you can't, because that scene you've just described, to me, it is the worst possible thing I could imagine. And then it's like, how do you not allow that just to keep spiraling and keep, because you're not there yet. And then you got a how many hour flight to get there? So even on the flight, that must have been torture.
Well, here was the beautiful thing. Funny you should mention that, is that what I've come to realize in hindsight is that sometimes our biggest gifts in life arrive looking like our biggest challenge. And for me, had I been able to race into a car and run down to the local hospital, I would have arrived as the hysterical mother, victim number 2 of this boulder. However, as life and this beautiful process had set up, I had to get up on a plane. And I can tell you that there is no better place to ask yourself some powerful questions than at 30,000 feet. And so as I sat there with my other daughter on this plane, my son holding down the fort back in the US, I began to really assess. I really began to assess moment and realized that by far the worst of all these horrible emotions was the feeling that I was powerless to make a difference, powerless to help my daughter. That was the most unacceptable of all the horrific emotions. And so what I realized as I looked back and wondered if there was possibly a way for me to get some of that power back was that looking back through time, when people are faced with incredible challenge or incredible obstacles, one of two things happen. They either have some semblance of being either paralyzed or destroyed by what happens. They become an additional victim, or they rise like the phoenix and become this most incredible version of themselves to go on and powerfully impact lives going forward. And so I asked myself, what is the common denominator of the people who have gone on to do incredible things? And it came down to that inner game. And I realized that even though I could not control my outer game at all, I could not roll up my sleeves and dive into the ICU room. That would not help, trust me. I could play a mean inner game, because for decades I had really, really studied the inner game, everything from, energy to neuroscience. I'd become a huge aficionado. And so that, I realized, was where the power lay.
But on the plane, you could do that. You have to have some background, because I would suspect, as a therapist, that direction, that two directions that you talked about, going to a victim's way of looking, oh my gosh, this happened to me and I can't do anything. I am helpless. And I
Yep.
do become the second victim. Or the second way, how do people that have been through things empower themselves? What are the thought process? What is the thing? But on that plane, you were able to actually go to, you had to have some background, I guess is the question, or I wonder.
So again, here's more of the beauty in the process that often I think that we're not aware of. And yet, for me, fortunately, I was able to pause. I was forced to pause and really assess, right? I was forced to pause to assess, what was I going to focus on and what was I going to make this mean, not only in the context of my life, but in the context of my daughter's life in the horrific event that she did not make it. Would I be able to perpetuate her legacy for her, the magnificent things that she had already done? Or would I take her life, twist it, and make it only mean that she had lived her 22 years so that I could become the mother of a child who was killed by a boulder? And clearly the second option was not acceptable. And interestingly enough, I realized, not on that plane, but a little bit later, that precisely some of the other really challenging things in my life that occurred, things that had felt impossible to feel grateful for, even though intellectually, spiritually, I knew I should, quote unquote, feel gratitude for them. Hello. I was like, nope, not feeling it, not feeling it. If I'm authentic, I am not feeling grateful for that experience. And certainly there were even some that were really tough to feel forgiveness about. And yet, what I realized a few days later, as the miraculous things had started to unfold in our story, by then we had been able to get her to Miami. She had survived the first 3 days. We were able to get her to Miami, and I was sitting in the little chapel there when it struck me that these things that had been impossible for me to feel grateful for, these things that had been impossible for me to forgive, those had been the drivers. Those had driven me in my pain, in my fury, in my hopelessness and despair to ask different questions, to seek different resources, and to begin in earnest a quest of inner game strategies and techniques that now were coming full blown to fruition. So yes, thanks to the things that now I could finally feel grateful for, because it was like a profound awe, like, oh my goodness. And if I had even suspected that those awful conditions were going to help me at some point, I would have emotionally reacted differently. The beauty of it was I had to react precisely the way I did in the moment in order for them to have this impact and this effect years later in our story.
Yes, because that's what I'm hearing. You know what I hear in you too is Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker. I mean, that's some of the things he's all, and I've studied him for 30 years, just about. And one of the things, sorry, my dog is hearing something here, is always ask a different question. That was always one of his things, because and I teach too, or in therapy, is that question or is that thought going to get you where you want to go? And if the answer is no, ask a different one that is going to focus you on what it is you need to do in this moment, because you didn't have, I call it, you can't afford it. I can't, in your mind, you can't afford to go anyplace else. Put the blinders on. This is all I can do right now. I got to save my daughter's life. And this is all I can do. And that is just so incredible. Even I know there's a lot of missing pieces, but to get her to Miami and into a US hospital probably was 40 years of your life gone by to get there,
It was an amazing experience. And to your point regarding the process, the interesting thing is that I think that maybe what cripples some people from believing that they can ask different questions or that they can make what feels like a jump is that most people try to jump too big too fast.
Yes.
Right? So what I realized, and the interesting thing is, I only recently became familiar with Tony Robbins' work. And when I started hearing it, literally, I'm getting chills even talking about this. I was like, oh my gosh, even I heard him say, clarity is your power. I've been saying that for so long. It really is. It's the magic of the universe. It's the magic of the universe. Truth, real truth with all capital letters, transcends the human being who's communicating it. I firmly believe that now more than ever.
And I got to make an additional comment. I think because, again, one of the daily tools that I teach and believe, that gratitude, when you can get into that alignment with gratitude, that's when you can hear these, I like your capital truth message, because that's when they'll come through, because you're in that space to allow something to come in. Because to me, when you're not aligned, you're just in that, static and nothing can get through. And that's where the emotions of the confusion and the anger and the frustration all come in. And when you sound like you've practiced, I think, this process to allow this gratitude to be part of your life, and a gift in some way, somehow, we don't know how, then you can be aligned. Oh my goodness, I am so glad you've had this for yourself and your family, not just Skylar, because you got other kids too. I mean, this was a process for all of you then.
It was, and it was a beautiful unfolding. And to your point about gratitude, the evolution, the unfolding of the understanding what that really, really meant before the boulder, practicing gratitude was almost like, I would say most people say their prayers at night.
Yeah, it was platitude. Yeah.
And it was a verbal and very heady thing. Yeah. What I really train when I work with my clients now, it's the gratitude, the vision. It's this premise that if your mind can be your own worst enemy, your imagination can be your best friend.
It's a good one.
It's going to that place where you're tapping in and aligning with the emotion behind what you're grateful for. So it's that I'm grateful for opening my eyes and hearing the inhale of the person I love next to me. It's It's feeling that light, delicate breeze that's coming in from the open window and knowing that there's an ocean outside. It's things that make your heart soar, not simply a grocery list of gratitude where it really starts to impact. And to that same measure, it was, for me, getting me out of that despair and those negative emotions began with thinking one little thought that my mind could authentically believe that would make me feel a little bit better. And that one thought on that plane was, has anyone throughout time ever accomplished anything that others believe to be impossible? And the answer was clearly yes. I was flying in that. I was flying in such a thing, right? That at one time was considered impossible. And it was tiny little beliefs. And I find, and maybe you find the same thing, Joanne, that when I work with my clients, often the first little stepping stone into this new pattern begins with thinking about someone else's journey and someone else being in a similar place, and that now they too have gone to this place that you want to eventually arrive at. And our minds can believe when they look outside of ourselves, when they go a little bit beyond our own little world to see that other things are possible, then they can begin making that transformation from impossible to I'm possible.
Beautiful. Yes. And it's funny. I think your GRIT is much like my ACT method, because awareness has to be the start of it. You got to start noticing what is going on here, but it's transference down to your heart. If you can't make this connection, you stay up here. And that, to me, that's where the doubts live, and that old crap, that you've heard or whatever from others, and you don't want to stay there. But
Right.
That's what's there right now. And you've done obviously a lot of work on yourself to be able to make that shift, to your heart, and believe it and know it and connect. And then you're talking about that first step. Absolutely. I think for anybody to step into or through fear, again, this is the brain, it's the stopping part right there. Can you speak for a moment about what you see as maybe a technique, a something to get started to step through that
Sure.
first step or through fear?
Sure. Well, first of all, there are just so many areas where you and I have so much synchronicity.
Sounds like it.
That acronym, you and I both discovered that, and how interesting that both of our A's are for awareness. I mean, awareness is huge. And so the first step really becomes that pause of identification. Where are you right now? And before we even ask, where do we want to go? Why do we want to go there? What's our rocket fuel that's going to help us there? And what are our momentum killers? We have to set the GPS. And the GPS, you can set the best GPS in the world for San Francisco when you're in New York. But when it asks that pivotal question, we'd like to access your current location. If you say no, you're going to have trouble getting to San Francisco, right? And I don't know what you find, but many, if not most, of the people who come to me feeling stuck, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like they're destined for more, and I've tried on my own and I keep getting the same disappointing results. I need change and I need it now. The very first thing we do is map out where they are right now and what that means. And interestingly enough, it starts with a stretch, not unlike the gym, of what might you call your mission? What might feel like a powerful legacy for you? Without all the disclaimers or saying, well, I don't know how I would do it. I don't know if it's realistic.
Doesn't matter.
Again, your imagination is your best friend. If you could be 75 years old looking back and say, I have this incredible, powerful life filled with success beyond my wildest dreams because I did this, this, and this, or impacted this, this, and this. What would this, this, and this be? And the number of people who can respond to that question quickly, there wouldn't, I mean, I could give away fingers on one hand and still be able to
Absolutely.
count them. And what's even more surprising to me is I get that because we're not encouraged. There's the games that we play when we're kids are what's wrong with this picture, not what's right with this picture. And it's stop daydreaming. It's you're wasting time. Be realistic. Take off the rose-colored glasses. Those whole thing. So I get the mission. I get the legacy. But what is shocking is when we get to, okay, so what are you passionate about? What do you love? What do you love doing? And what are your skills? What are your superpowers?
Smoke. And I'll tell you what I hear the most. And sorry, clients, I don't mean to giggle here, but what I hear pretty consistently, I don't want
Right.
a person that does this. I don't want a job that I'm like, no, wait, scratch. What do you want? What is it that you're going to focus on? Yeah, because and that's why I do call it a skill. These are, learned. And I don't know where we learn these. I had to learn them myself personally. And a lot of them just through trial and error and good counselors. That's why I became a counselor, because I had a good one. But I don't know where else you learn these. It's like you have to pay, like in school, to come to somebody like you or me to learn these, because I don't know where people learn them.
And yet the investment is priceless. Sorry, not to sound cliche, but these are skills that have been shutting you down consistently. And when I can see it from the body language, even when I'm on Zoom with someone, when it's clicking and it doesn't take, when you have the right guidance, it doesn't take that long, right? And
oh, I'm sorry. In the podcast, you can't see my eyes getting big and glazed over. Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what she's expecting me to do. Yeah, there's a stutter or the click. You're saying, right? I get it.
I mean, the click and almost the palpable release of the fear. And to your point about the fear, we're conditioned to fear, and we're conditioned to pop labels onto certain physiological experiences, and what we're often experiencing is simply unfamiliarity, right? It's unfamiliarity. That's not
unknown.
Yes. And that bleeds into our lack of self-trust and our concern of when we are depending on the world out there to behave in a certain way so that we react in a way that feels like joy, then of course we loathe feeling vulnerable, because we realize that we're setting ourselves up for not only pleasure, but most dominantly pain, the pain that we're afraid of, right? So only until we start really identifying where we are, and to your point, when someone says, I'm ready for a new job, the focus is not on the new job when they're talking like that. The focus is very much on the invisible story of reliving why you're proclaiming that you're ready for this new job, why you want this new job. Your energy is completely focused on the dark side of your ask instead of the presence of that which you want. When you're able to shift it, and so much of it is your language. You touched on it, Joanne, where one of the things that I find real powerful for my clients in the awareness category is to play with them for a moment, because inevitably someone will say, here's one that I even had today: how do I stop living in fear? How do I stop living in fear? And in that sentence, what tense is that creating? It's a present tense. So when we say my challenge is ba 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 ba, and I ask people, what do you think is the most powerful word? Most people would come back saying challenge, of course. Well, sure, it's a powerful word, but the most powerful word is that word is, because that is the programming code. Talk about truth with all capital letters. That is the unquestionable reality from which our subconscious and our conscious brain makes all of its decisions. If I say I am an introvert, every single thought and belief
I
and version of my
am.
truth and action and emotion and feeling of hurt or feeling of appreciation is going to stem from that reality that I am an
I
introvert.
am. I am what I am. I think that was Popeye too. That was like in my childhood. It's like that was one of the best statements from a cartoon. I am what I am. And and it's true. We tell ourselves lots of those, but they're not a lot of times positive ones. And shifting those is really clear when you use this awareness that you're talking about. And I love this because it's funny. This week, a podcast that's coming out is really about the words you use and
Mm-hmm.
how you use them to and that it develops your beliefs.
Yes.
And these are things that are so tucked back there, we don't even hear them anymore. And I think it's so critical. What you're saying is, I love your invisible story too. I think that that's we don't either backwards or forwards, because I think we don't see anymore the story that we continually tell ourselves. And even looking for that new job, which is a new but invisible because we haven't done it yet. It's like what are we telling ourselves, in that new story? Tell a new story. you
Yes.
know
Yes.
Create a new story.
Yes. But first, identify where you are right now, because guess what? You're going to take yourself with you wherever you go. So if you are hesitant to really embrace, and that's what the G stands for, is
Uh-huh.
own your greatness in the GRIT formula. And that means that, guess what? It's the boulders, it's the scars that cry out that you are mightier than the frickin' boulders that are part of your greatness. It's not that you've gone through a lifetime dodging these. It's not that you have somehow figured out a way for life to tell you that you're worthy. It's that these scars are your cloak of worthiness, and that you and you alone have your own unique, mighty story to tell. In some moments, it's the partnership, in my humble opinion, of those moments that are so joyous and beautiful they take your breath away, with the power and the push, the propulsion and recalibration of those moments that knock your wind out. And between the two of them, you have a lifetime to remember.
And they make us who we are. Those scars, I feel like with childbirth, yeah, that shows, hey, I went through this. I even have wrinkles here. These are my therapist wrinkles, really.
Yes.
Okay. And podcast, I've got wrinkles between my eyebrows. And because I furrow my brow, really listening and contently. But you know what? Those are my therapist wrinkles. I'm proud of those. I've done it for 30 years, but yeah, they make us who we are. And I love it. Now, you have said a couple quotes. I want to hear one. Do you have one that's a favorite for you?
So off the cuff, I one that long before the boulder has always propelled me. And I have always been an aficionado of really great quotes. I mean, we're just, human beings are so freaking amazing in the wisdom that comes from their challenges, not from squeaking through life with no rough edges, right? But it really is the quote. And her name escapes me because she was the first female president of Africa. And it's, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And for
Ah,
years and years and years and years, that was what greeted me on my phone, and long before the boulder. And I believe that that's super, super powerful, because I believe that fear ultimately can be our superpower when we harness that energy, harness and realize it is an energy, it is an opportunity, it is a beckoning, come hither, come explore, come splash in some mud puddles, come get a little bit dirty, come experience that thrill and adventure with the promise of something amazing that you haven't seen before.
Oh, I love it. That's beautiful. And I'm trying to remember one, because it reminds me of, I think it's live in your uncomfortable zone, because that is where things grow, or something. They had a nice little growing thing in it. But yeah, if you're uncomfortable, you are growing. And when you're growing, you are expanding, and you are going to use all these talents as you move forward. And that fear is going to be your friend. And it is a secret, though. That's why I call that my ACT 3 secrets, because you know what? Nobody talks about this awareness. I love it that you do, because and your GPS, because if you don't know, number one, what's going on in your head to get you to the next place, they are secrets because nobody tells us these things. And we are telling you them today, that this is what certainly Meredith and I've used with thousands of clients to get the results they want. It's not about me or you. It's about what they want with their goals. Oh,
and that these are, and you and I were talking about this off camera, the beautiful thing that, again, I would say is a secret or a misconception, that these are skills that can be learned. These are specific tools and strategies that when you begin applying them, you don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to be a huge celebrity. You don't have to be someone whose company is responsible for flying people to the moon. You can be you, exactly where you are right now. And when you begin applying this process, you will transform if you are committed to facing a little bit of the unfamiliar with the belief that you can do this and you can get there, and it will be beyond worth it when you do.
absolutely. I know. I often say, most people fear, taking those first steps, because it is the unknown and the unfamiliar, as you call it, and that's beautiful. But it's like when you get there, you're like, oh my gosh, the benefit for that. When I look back and think, that little dust ball of fear, are you kidding me? Look what I've got now in my life. It is just so amazing. Yeah, when people can just step over it, into it, through it, they get the payoff.
And I feel like that clue is there from the time we are very, very young. I mean, if you look at children learning to walk, when they take a couple steps and then they plop down, they tend to often look up at the adults with fear in their eyes, or what we could interpret as fear is like, oh my God, did something bad just happen? And when the adults go, no, it's okay, you're going to be fine. The expectation of success is there. The expectation is there's nothing wrong when you plop down, when you've taken a couple steps and that's where you are. You plop down. No one says, you stupid fool, we're a biped. What are you doing crawling? Right? I mean, we have that expectation. And so if we can carry that forward into our lives and realize that the comfort zone isn't quite as comfortable as it's made out to be.
Right.
And that when we are willing to view the unfamiliar place simply as the place, okay, we're hopping on a new bicycle, there are going to be a couple skin knees and probably little crashes along the way, but that's part of learning to ride a bike. And when you learn to ride that bike, it is a skill that sticks with you forever. And if you are listening to this, wherever you are, especially if you are facing some sort of obstacle or belief that you are destined for more and you don't know how to get there, this is something that is within reach. Just sometimes you have to get a little bit of a boost from someone else who already has whatever strategy, whatever formula. They're out there. They're willing. They're ready for you to come and make it your own.
You gotta ask, though.
Yep.
And that's just another thing you do have to ask. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Meredith. And how can people find you to work with you, if they'd like to? And I know you have something to offer also.
I sure do. And in case you can't tell, my passion really is helping people to realize that obstacles are a beautiful part of our lives. And yet there are two ways that we can respond to them. And one tends to paralyze us, and the other will take us to places that we did not believe could be so beautifully possible. They transform us from a world of impossibilities to I'm possibilities. So if you are in a place where you are feeling overwhelmed, you are feeling stuck, you know that now is your time. I want to offer you to reach out for what I call a power whoosh. It's 20 minutes where you will be able to connect with me via Zoom, and where I will listen to whatever you're bumping up against, and we will strategize for 20 minutes and see what we can do to help you find what might be the next step in your strategy, your next step forward to go beyond those boulders, so you too can live the reality that these boulders don't come to destroy us. They come to destroy the things that we have been allowing to get in our way.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
A 20-minute power whoosh, Joanne will have the link for that. It's bit.ly.com/power whoosh, surprisingly enough. And
Wonderful.
Once again, I'm Meredith Alexander. You can find me on social media, but this is my passion. And Joanne and I were both here cheering for you, cheering for your vision, your mission, your I'm possibilities, and we want to see you thrive and succeed.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. This was so great. So much good stuff in this, Meredith. Thank you enough.
And thank you guys for sticking with us.
Absolutely. Great. So now I do want to just tell you about our next podcast too. That will be with Jack Ora. He's an MSW that's going to speak on anxiety and the transgendered issues that come with it in a fascinating way that only Jack can present. So you're not going to want to miss that. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for listening. Please support our podcast by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. Please, to show your support. And remember to use and practice a skill we shared today to feel the joys of life. Remember, you can always call us 760-485-6784 for that free 10-minute consultation where we can discuss your next step. Or you can go to our website at anxietysimplified.net for more on how to get certified for an emotional support animal today. And remember to share the love.